All right, so this is I think our second technical steering committee meeting for 2022. Some news to update really quick is Hyper's cloud service went into beta on Monday, which is pretty awesome. And there's kudos to Trip and Tyler for making that happen. Sent out all kinds of notifications to Product Hunt and LinkedIn and Twitter and just about every channel you could possibly think of. So that was really fun. And any support will be appreciated just to get the word out. In terms of Hyper open source core, this month, there's been some changes with kind of our mono repo, really around just updating the version to 3.0 or 3.1 and just improving some of the boundary areas. So we provided a standard way to report errors in adapters, and that was the majority of the changes the last 6 weeks. So now every adapter reports errors and successes exactly the same, and all the ports kind of verify that, which makes things consistent from end to end, which is really cool. And we updated Hypertest and Hypercore and Hyper App Opine to match those standards and all the ports as well. And I think that's going to just continue to add more stability and robustness into the core. And then in terms of the data port, where we have some issues in place to provide more transparency around indexes. And we're also going to provide some more education around indexes. In some adapters that we use, some of the data services, let's say you add millions of documents and then you run an index or create an index, it'll run in the background just fine, but it may take a little bit longer because of the amount of documents in the system, which if you query it, it'll actually bring the index process from the background to the foreground. And even though we run on a cluster, it requires all the nodes in the cluster to build the index. So some congestion can happen. So we want to educate any client that may be using this, kind of ways to think about indexing, and really a good practice with indexing is to create your indexes before you add a ton of documents. So with that said, we're going to add more documentation around that and add a couple of endpoints on the data port of the ability to list indexes, the ability to delete an index, and the ability to explain the plan of the index. And these endpoints, if they're not available in an adapter, then the adapter can return a not implemented. Tyler, is there anything you want to add to that? Did I cover that okay?
I think you've touched on all the important bits.
Okay.
Like you said, I mean, there's definitely some adapters for local environments that aren't going to have like indexing capabilities, like if you're using a flat file sort of adapter, for example. So I think definitely just documenting that, if your adapter has no need for implementing this method, then just sending that not implemented and following the web standards there. I think it's the good way to go. So
Cool. And then the other kind of major bit that we added around the storage adapters, or at least like the S3, we split S3 into two different adapters. There's a namespace adapter, which kind of allows for a multi-tenant S3 bucket, and then just the S3 adapter. And one of the things we implemented was the ability to do pre-signed URLs to upload your data. So if you make a request through Hyper, you can request to upload your data with a pre-signed URL, and then you would get back that URL and you would actually do your uploading through that instead of through Hyper. And mainly the infrastructure we're using with Hyper Cloud basically supports a 10 megabyte limit. So using pre-signed URLs allows you to upload files that are much larger, and it doesn't go through the Hyper Cloud infrastructure. And we did some research on this, and all the major cloud vendors usually support this method as a best practice. So if you want to upload a lot of data in your service, to generate a pre-signed URL and then use that to upload the data. And you can also do the same thing for downloading. We haven't implemented that yet, but we are discussing maybe implementing an ability to request a pre-signed URL to do downloading as well. Did I cover that, Tyler? Okay.
Yep, you got that all covered.
Cool.
Is that a new method on the storage port? Like where would you actually request the pre-signed URL?
Yeah, Tyler, do you want to take that one since you're more familiar with the API? He may be frozen.
Yeah.
Let me pull up the adapter and see the API. I think what we did. Share my screen.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Sorry, I think I just got dropped. So yeah, basically, Casey, there isn't another method. It's the same put on from the adapter that the request isn't actually trying to upload a stream of data, that the request is actually wanting a pre-signed URL, and then it will just return that in the response as JSON.
Okay.
And so that's at the adapter level, and then core just passing that straight down. Bit is the app Hyper. The RESTful app, in this case, the app opine, since it's HTTP based, we're actually used to distinguish between the person, their request wants to upload a stream of data or to get back a pre-signed URL at the content header. And so the content type want to type and find out.
So, am I getting that both are options, or is it only the pre-signed URL now?
No, it's optional. So if you send essentially a flag requesting a pre-signed URL in the arguments, then it'll return a pre-signed URL. If you don't, if you just do it like normal, it will expect an object to stream. into the adapter.
All right, got it.
Yes, yes, you basically request you request a signed URL, you'll get it back, and then you can post to that signed URL
Okay,
with an object string. So it's kind of a two-step process instead of a one.
Right.
And when you post to the signed URL, you're posting directly to that host. It doesn't go through Hyper's infrastructure, as Tyler said.
probably saves you guys a bunch of bandwidth too.
Right.
Well, and it really prevents any kind of blocking anyway. But really it's the infrastructure that's providing that guardrail, and again, all the documentation seems to lead to being a best practice. One of our items to do with our SDK HyperConnect is to basically make that implementation seamless. So from calling a file upload with HyperConnect into a storage service, you wouldn't really have to think about it. It would just automatically use a pre-signed URL.
Yeah, sorry guys, my connection just keeps getting dropped, so I'm gonna turn off my video.
Cool.
But yeah, this is really a limitation of the infrastructure, as Tom and Tripp had mentioned. But no matter where folks deploy Hyper, this sort of limitation is going to be something that, whether you're using API gateway on AWS or some other gateway, or like an ALB or whatever it is on GCP, these sort of limitations are everywhere. So even if someone wanted to host their own, like a self-hosted Hyper, these limitations will most likely be encountered. And so we wanted a solution built into the platform for that. Not to mention that it is considered best practice to do these large file uploads in this way.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of pre-send URLs. Out of curiosity, do you guys have a default expiration for them? Is that a parameter?
It's not a parameter. Right now, it's up to the adapters to decide that, but
Okay.
we did consider exposing that sort of thing, especially for the download pre-signed URL use case.
Cool.
But it's definitely something we've considered, and if you think there's more use cases for it, then definitely share them with one of us in Slack, and we'll get them documented.
Cool.
Yep. And then the other thing that's worth announcing, I know, is Tyler, which I'm excited about, has been working on a pouchdb adapter. Someone cross-ported pouchdb to Dino, and our nano image. Tyler's working on doing a pouchdb adapter for the nano image, so that you can run, kind of Hyper CLI in your local environment and connect and use the services either in memory or locally persisted for development or testing. And then you can kind of connect to Hyper Cloud or your Hyper instance in the cloud for production kind of thing.
Yeah, so the pouchdb adapter, it's basically done. I was running it through all the methods are there, and all of the internal tests are passing, and then I ran it through against Hypertest, and all of those tests passed except for one, which when I went down that rabbit hole, ended up discovering a little bug in HyperConnect. That's the source of that test failure. So I just need to, since Hypertest uses HyperConnect, I'm fixing the bug in HyperConnect, and then pouchdb will be good to go.
Nice.
But I want to see it passing all of the Hypertest suite before I go ahead and tag and release it and whatnot. But the plan is, as Tom said, to move it into the nano image, and then really start pushing the nano image is sort of a way for developers to develop using Hyper locally in like an ephemeral cloud environment, and then pairing that with Hyper cloud applications.
And then Casey, I recall a few weeks ago, you started working on a DynamoDB cache adapter. Have you got any news to report on that?
So the cache adapter, all of the functions are implemented except for the, I can't remember the name of it, but basically the one where you search, and actually that one is implemented, it's just not tested. So the two things that prevented the progress on that is when I was initially doing this around a month or so ago, ran into some hypertest errors, and then, you know, you guys already suggested that the newest updates probably fix that. I actually on Sunday went back to, I was on a car ride in the passenger seat and went back to it, and I was actually having some errors on the Hyper startup scripts. So pretty much everything that's been slowing it at this point has been kind of unrelated to the adapter itself. So just need to look a little bit closer at it. But yeah, I mean, the only one, I don't know how in the weeds you want to get with this here, but DynamoDB does have a default expiration. However, they only guarantee that it's within 48 hours of the time. And I think generally it's pretty fast, but it might be 48 hours later. So I think the best way to do it is sort of like a polling every minute or so to see, you know, what's expired. I think that's kind of the only unusual challenge that it ran into.
Cool. Yeah, and you know, again, you could you know, possibly return and not implement it, and just thinking out loud here, if it doesn't make sense, or you know, kind of disclaimer saying that, you know, this adapter is not guaranteed to expire something, you know, within 48 hours or something.
Sure. Yeah, might just make it the default DynamoDBs, and then you can, in your own logic, expire it if you want.
Yeah, there's a SQLite adapter written for the cache service, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but it stores a date along with the record. And then when anyone tries to fetch a record, that date is checked against like the expiration, also stored with the record. And if it's passed, then it doesn't, it programmatically just says, hey, this thing is this record's been evicted. It's expired. Well, not evicted, it's just expired. So
yeah.
Okay. That's definitely good for fetching it. The only thing is that I can think of is if you have like some type of secure string that you want to delete, you want to ensure is deleted. You still have to do something, but that's a pretty good solution to solving that, actually. Just checking the date. So do you,
yeah,
do you delete it if it's expired?
I believe it does.
Okay.
I recall the implementation correctly.
Yeah, I'll post it in the chat. It's a good one to bring up. That was a fun adapter to work on. SQLite's fun.
Yeah, funny enough, the pouchdb adapter, because it uses indexed DB underneath the hood, but that's not implemented in the Dino runtime. So it's actually using a shim built on top of SQLite for that. So
Cool.
Very cool.
yeah, so I guess for your use case, Casey, like with a secure string, it would only be deleted if it was queried
Right.
for. So, but that sort of thing you could definitely, I think, highlight in the documentation for the adapter.
True. So yeah, I mean, whenever I feel like fighting through some config errors, there's not much time left other than verifying that one function and running some tests on it. But yeah,
Yeah, and if you're still getting errors with the new scripts, just post in the Slack and the support channel. We'll take a look at those. Again, we kind of went through and audited every single adapter in the Hyper 63 org and just refine the error handling, making that consistent in the way it talks back up to the ports. So there may be some bugs still in there that we'd love to look at.
yeah, and it might just be like an incompatibility with, if I was working on one version of Hyper and then it switched, it's possible that that is causing it too. So
Cool. Well, so that's all the updates that I had. Trip, do you have anything to share from your side?
So we're working on this month, focusing on getting the word out and for HyperCloud and trying to get some people trying it out so we can ask them good questions and have that inform our roadmap. So that's my near-term focus.
Yep. Yeah. So we are, we've got a couple of things on the roadmap to tackle that we have put on hold. I guess hold's the right term. One thing that we're working on the roadmap is scopes, and Trip has put together some killer design documents, but the scopes will allow in HyperCloud to set something as like a connection string to be read only or read write, et cetera. So you could define your connection strings with certain access control capabilities or certain scopes. We're pretty excited about that one. And then the other is, kind of a big lift, but it's to add analytics to HyperCloud so that you can see the activity that your clients are interacting with as they use the HyperCloud service, which would consist of, kind of visualizations as well as log feedback. And we have some design work to do that, but Trip has started doing the design work on that and shared it with some folks, and we're pretty excited about that. But at this point in time with releasing beta, our focus is getting the word out. We're going to a conference and sponsoring it in May for Remix. And I think Tyler's got a plan to build a little proof of concept with Remix and Hyper. So I think that's pretty cool. And we're just going to continue to, reach out to customers and try to, get feedback and identify things that we can improve with Hyper and add to our roadmap. Does anyone have anything else to add? Any, any thoughts or questions at this point?
congrats you guys on the launch. It's
Yay.
been a long time coming.
Yeah, I think it was pretty well received. We got, yep, Tyler.
not gonna do that for the remix. Then for here, uh,
Just having a hard time hearing you, Tyler. Give him a minute. Casey, did you have a chance to see our little animation video?
Oh yeah, that was you released that a week or so ago.
Yeah,
Yep. I saw that. Very cool. You have the commercial now. Now you gotta play it on the Super Bowl next year.
that's right. That's right.
You were about to say when I said when I congratulated you, you were about to say that you had reached out and gotten like response from someone or something.
I was just saying that we got some good feedback from our launch, like from signups and from upvotes on Product Hunt, which is pretty cool.
Cool.
Hey, Tyler, are you back? Can you? I don't see his mic yet.
are you able to hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Sorry, I don't know how my
Can kind of hear you.
Yeah. That's all right. Yeah, so I think that's where we're at. We wanted to present at the Open Source 101, but they had technical difficulties with Zoom for our slot, so we didn't get a chance to present Hyper OSS, is I guess what I've started calling it, kind of the open source version. But we will intend to try to make that more visible and try to get more members to build more adapters, I think, at this point. But Tyler, can you talk now?
I'm gonna try and build a remix stack using Hyper. That's basically
Yeah.
but like with the not just a stack using remix, but on top of the remix feature called remix stacks. Those are sort of pre-canned templates. I'm going to try and build one for Hyper.
Nice.
And I guess the last thing that's worth mentioning, because Tyler spent a lot of work on this and it turned out pretty cool, was that he built a load testing framework for Hyper Cloud, and we can kind of test data and storage. And I think he's working on the queues. He may have finished that, but it's really cool. You can use, kind of an English-like description language that I guess it's like YAML, but you describe what you want to do and then attach that to the code that does the work. And then this tool Auxiliary actually runs it, and you can run it on multiple nodes or a single node or whatever, but it'll run it and generate reports. And as we refine that, that could be something we open source for Hyper OSS, so anyone could like run load test on Hyper. It'll probably be specific to Hyper, but anyway, it's pretty cool stuff. Yep, the simple queue load tests are done, Tyler said. So yep, so it's 4:30. And I think that's everything. Does anyone have any final comments before we close this meeting?
I don't.
Awesome. Well, I hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thanks for taking time, and we'll see you next month.
See you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
You
you.
guys.
Have a good afternoon. See you.